sermon's going to be a little bit different. As you all know, next week is Pledge Sunday. So one of the things I want to do today in the sermon is to sort of talk about pledging and how we are moving towards a new sort of vision of how we do stewardship, how this all happens within the greater church, because it's important as a pastor sometimes to give a pastoral sermon to just sort of explain what all is going on, because there's so much going on. It's really hard for the average person to know like what to pay attention to, okay? So that's what we're going to do today. So we can go ahead and have the first slide, please. So we're taking on stewardship. Now, when we talk about stewardship, we mean it in lots of ways. When we did the ministry fair, that's a type of stewardship. When we built the garden for the butterflies outside, that's a type of stewardship, right? When we are building things on the church, like replacing the HVAC system, we're investing in the future, right? We're saying, hey, we're going to put a 20-year system in. We're probably going to be here in 20 years, right? These are all different forms of stewardship, but so is the pledge drive. Why? Because for churches to operate, you need volunteers, but you also need money, okay? Just the reality. Should it be that way? Ought it be that way? Is that the fault of this, that, or another thing? I don't know. I'm not a theologian. That's questions for them to answer, right? But in our world today, you need volunteers, you need money to be able to make impact. And what we're about here at Nativity is our impact. Next slide, please. So I come from sort of a different background than most people do, okay? I think churches have generally got it wrong when they think about stewardship, okay? And most of you have probably experienced churches that really sort of get it wrong because they make stewardship about fundraising, and they make fundraising about making the budget. When they say making the budget, what they mean is a budget has been cast, and it's going to cost us X amount of dollars, so please give me that much, right? Therefore, it isn't really a conversation. It's an ask. That's not bad. That's not horrible. But you know what? It doesn't bring out passion, and it doesn't make the focus where the focus should be. The focus should not be on the budget. The focus should be on the ministry. Because we don't do budgets here in the sense of like, that's not what we do on an average Monday. We don't sit around with budgets. We're here to do ministry. Now, the budget gives us an idea of what ministries we're doing. So when we start thinking about stewardship and we start thinking about pledges, we should think not about numbers necessarily, but what those numbers represent. Okay? See, I want to move us from a place where we talk about the budget in this sort of cold, dead way to a place where we talk about ministry. Why? Because most of you are not passionate about budgets, and that's a good thing. But all of you all, you're passionate about ministry. You're passionate about making sure that the hungry are fed, the naked clothed, oppression is fought against, and justice is found. You are passionate about good music and excellent worship and the glorification of God and the movement of people and the spark of faith that leads us to being better versions of who we are, right? That's what you're passionate about. That's what the Spirit is doing in this community. The budget is just a conversation about that. But that, the ministry, is everything that matters when it comes to a church. Next slide, please. Why do I think churches have gotten this wrong? You all know that I don't think the good old days were actually all that good. I've given that sermon many times to you all. One of the ways it was not good is that we have these natural cycles in the church that go up and down, right? Main lines grow. We hit a cap. We start shrinking. This has happened 4 or 5 times in American history. At the time of the Revolution, 15% of people went to church. By the time of the Civil War, 82% went to church. Okay? This happens. Okay? The lie we were told, the one we bought into, the one I want you to not ever buy into again, is that the pastor grows the church. I don't grow the church. It's not me. Yeah, the better we do things up here, the easier it is to invite someone. But I'm going to tell you, it's not the pastor. We don't do it. But during that giant growth time from like the 1930s to the late 1960s, We told everyone, you know why you're growing? Because I rock. So listen to me, because I know it all. Okay? But then we hit a natural stagnation and then eventually a natural decline. And so what happened? Everyone went, where are all the good pastors? Where have they all gone? We were like an Alanis Morissette song. Okay? 4 of you got that reference. All right. The problem is we forget that what attracts people to church is that the Spirit is active. What attracts people to church is that we are moving and helping and being part of our community. We are growing faith. They can see the fire we have inside of us for the love of God towards our fellow humans. And while that looks different for each and every one of you, and you're called in slightly different ways to do that, that is what brings people to church. It ain't me. It's your love for God. It's how God has transformed your lives that determines how the church does. Next slide, please. How do we correct this? I think the way we correct this when it comes to stewardship specifically, correct this sort of view that it's all about the pastor and we sink or swim with the pastor, because it's just simply not true. The way we change this when it comes to stewardship is to go ahead and be honest and transparent, right? Honesty and transparency is the currency of the church. The church gets in trouble when it becomes dishonest or starts hiding things. That is number one thing that says a system is sick. I went into some really hard case churches, right? That was what I did in my early career. Tell you, churches that are in trouble, churches that are doing the wrong thing, they're dishonest and they hide things. There's tons of secrets. Those of you who came from churches that died or are dying, think about it. How many things could you not say out loud? How many secrets were there, whether or not you knew them or not? So when it comes to this, we're going to be super honest, super transparent. So the way we're doing it, the approach that we are taking is super simple. If you are a committee chair, you've already participated in it. We sent you a whole bunch of things saying, hey, here's what you oversee budgetary-wise. Fill it out. Tell me what your dreams are, right? What is it you want to do next year? What is it the Spirit is calling you to do next year? And our chairs filled that out, right? And I told them, if you have a huge increase, expect a call, not because I'm upset, but because I'm excited. Someone's going to reach out to you and say, why is it? Or heck, better yet, just tell me what it is you're thinking of. Because if you feel the Spirit is calling your committee or your group or your area to do something more, I want to know about it because that's exciting. That's empowering. And so they sent it back. And we have a whole idea of what it is. Now, this is all on a sheet. I've shared it with all of council, so if you're on council, you can see it as it comes in, right? You want to see it as it comes in or want me to show it to you? Just ask. Okay? It's that transparent. You want to see it? Just ask. I figure most people don't get the same level of joy I do out of Excel spreadsheets, or I would have shared it with everybody here. Okay? Next slide, please. But this makes the pledge drive different than in previous years. See, the pledge drive this year is a conversation because we have heard now from all our committees what they're dreaming of, what their ideas are, and how much they think it's going to cost. And so now I come to you, our stakeholders, the people who love this church, the people who are this church. And the conversation goes to the next stage. So our folks want X amount of money to do all these things, and we'll talk about those things next week. But all these new cool ideas. The question is, what do we think? Are we going to fund those ideas? Can we fund those ideas? Right? Are you inspired to fund those ideas? Your pledge is how you respond to us, right? Because what I'm saying is this is what we need to do this thing. The same question happens every time someone calls you to volunteer, right? For any of our activities, we need a certain number of volunteers. If the volunteers don't show up, we don't do it, right? This is no different, except for instead of talking about volunteerism, we're talking about money. Why is it talked about the same way? Because both ends of it are just stewardship in different categories. You follow so far, guys? What we're doing here? All right, next slide. So here is the math, because some of you do like math like I do. So here's the math. If we have 135 pledges, that would probably get us about 240,000 in pledges, okay? If that's what we get back, if we're somewhere in that zone, what we're going to hear is, yeah, I see the new ministries. I don't know that we can, or I don't know that I want to necessarily fund them. In that case, we might do a few of them and bring down the deficit a little. Because one thing I do hear is like, hey, can we bring that deficit down? And that's smart. You can't run deficits forever, right? So that's one of our goals. If you're closer to like, I don't know, 145 pledges, 250,000, a little bit more ministries, a little less deficit. You follow the game here, right? If we get to 270, then we can do most of the ministries, if not all of them, and reduce the deficit. By the way, everyone keeps asking me this. I didn't anticipate, but what is the magic number where you can do all the things and get rid of the deficit in 1 year? It's 319. I went ahead and calculated that up. Okay? I didn't put it up there because that is one heck of a stretch goal. That is $100,000 more in stewardship. That felt like a jump to me, but hey, maybe I'm just not listening to the Spirit enough. You guys can tell me the answer to that question. Okay? But this is sort of how the conversation goes. Where you all land as a group tells us what you think of the new ministries, how concerned are you about the deficit, where are you? Now, that is not the last word you all get on it. You know that, right? Because you guys get the final word. That will occur at annual meeting. Because that's where you all approve you all's budget. Because it's all about you and what we want to do. Next slide, please. So I want to finish up by going through what is it that we have spent our money on in 2024, because I don't think people get that. And the way we're going to think about that is we're going to go ahead and go through it in the sense of for every dollar given to general fund. Now, some of you are going to immediately go, oh, hey, I know all the details. What about the benevolence fund? I'm not including the benevolence fund arena. If you want to, you can do the math. Take what we gave to benevolence fund. It's a matter of public record. And add that to the faith formation outreach, because almost all of it falls into that category by the way I split things up, which will make sense once we get to the next slide, okay? But this is just general fund, because that's what we pledge to. We pledge to general. All right, for every dollar you give, next slide. Where does it go? 32 cents of that dollar is going to go for faith formation community engagement. Now, when you say, well, those are big, giant headers, yeah, because we do so many things, it's hard to come up with very precise words. I'll give you an idea of what this means. VBS, meal kit ministries, youth retreats, God's work our hands. You're getting the vision here. This is when we go out and physically help people. We go out and give money or goods or whatever to people, right? That is that. It is also the faith formation, like when we are learning more about the faith and engaging in like all our educational stuff, like Sunday school and all these sorts of things. You guys follow? 32 cents on the dollar. This is remarkable because this is the first church I've ever served where the majority of, or the largest category is going to the thing Jesus talked about the most, which is helping our community. Next slide. The second largest category is the other thing Jesus talked about, which is worship. So this is all our musical stuff. This is all our time spent in preparation. This is all our work that we do to have church services. But it's not just church services, it's Lenten services, and it's Christmas, and it's Easter, and it's Holy Week, and it's all these sorts of things. Basically everything we do in this room, and sometimes in that room. Oh, and sometimes in the other room. Okay, oh, and in that room too, right? But this is part of what God called us to do, right? We are supposed to proclaim the word and distribute the sacraments. All that falls under that falls in here. We're supposed to glorify God with music and art and all this. That all falls under here. 28 cents on the dollar, guys. We just crossed the 50% mark. Cleared it really good. Next one. 25 cents. Now, I was really at a tear about this because traditionally when I worked at smaller churches, I would take the amount of hours per room by the total square foot of the room and come up with a calculation that would then feed into these others. I started down that road at this building and realized this would take me a year to figure out. Okay? So the reality is a lot of that 25 cents probably is in faith formation, probably in worship, because like we're using this room right now and that costs money, and that's for worship. We're using rooms over there, that's for faith formation. We're using rooms over there for fellowship, right? Now, the really remarkable thing about us that makes us different than a lot of churches is I can tell you reliably Sunday through Friday, so excluding Saturdays for a moment, Basically, there is somebody doing something from about 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. I would say that from about 7 to about, I don't know, let's say 5-ish, or maybe 6-ish, or 7-ish, somewhere around there, the majority of this building is being used every day. That is way different than most churches. We don't really have a ton of free space. Why? Because we're doing so much ministry, we use all the spaces we have. So that 25% could probably be kicked around. Now, some people say, well, hold it, Pastor, from that 9 o'clock to 5:59 p.m., it's just doing nothing. I'm like, well, that's how buildings work, guys. Now, if you have a 2 a.m. ministry, you're just dying to launch, please come see me. I'd love to have it used during those periods of time. But my experience has been, if you set a meeting after 9, nobody shows up and you're just here by yourself. And that's sad. All right, next one. There we go. So 7 cents. So 7 cents is on the things that we need to sort of operate. We need a copier, or we don't have bulletins. We need a one call now so we can get hold of everybody. We need the internet because, internet, right? We need these things. That's only like 7 cents, and that's all of it. That's all of technology and all the administrative costs, those sorts of things. 7 cents, guys. That's really good. Continue on. The remaining 8 cents. This gets broken into all sorts of little categories. So 4 cents goes to stewardship and finance. That's all our banking fees. And the little cards we give you and the time I spend on stewardship and the time that's volunteered on stewardship. 2 cents goes to fellowship and building relationships in and outside the congregation. So this is like the time we use going ahead and having the picnic. This is the time and money we use going out and saying, okay, so we want to work with these different nonprofits. Let's talk to all of them and figure out where we're being called to, right? We pick one, that's faith formation. The other 9 we talked to and went, I'm not feeling it. That falls into this, right? Because you got to do those sorts of things. And then 1 cent goes to evangelism, because we are Lutherans after all, and everything else that we do, okay? 2 people got the joke. Hey, I'm doing good. I got 6 people laughing this morning. So that's where that goes. Now, the reality is, if I broke out all of the volunteer hours, that's probably a lot more. Most of evangelism is built off of volunteers, and I thank those volunteers for your hard and incredible work. That's what the budget is so far this year. These are current numbers I'm using. That's probably pretty close to what the budget's going to look like next year. We'll have growth, but that doesn't change these percentages by all that much. And so now it's on you guys. The pledge drive is going. The pledge drive is happening. I think we've gotten about high 50s for pledges back. I don't have any report on how much that is or how much of an increase that is or anything like that yet, because it's early. But next week you're going to come. Next week you're going to be here. Next week you're going to give your pledge. That signals to us as leadership where you want us to go, where you want us to be, what you want us to do. So take time this week with those pledge cards. Pray about it, think about it, talk to the other people who are in your financial lives and are decision makers, whatever that means for you, and tell us what you think. To start, continue this conversation. Amen.